Welcome, everybody. This is a first in a series of student and resident webinars that we're excited to have you join us. We will be having more sessions probably closer to fall now or late summer, but we'll be sending out more information as those are scheduled and those, right? We will also be sending you an evaluation at the end of this session. And we'd love to hear your comments on this session and then also get your input on other sessions you'd like to see in the future. I want to just really make sure that we're providing some education for our students and residents that will meet your needs most of all. So just so you know that if you haven't already done so, please put your name and school in the chat so we know everyone that's attending. And I just want to introduce our speaker for today. We're really excited to have Dr. Tiffani Milless. She is physician and founding partner in the Goldfinch Laboratory and also a very active Iowa Medical Society member and past president. So I'm going to turn it over to you just to, and you can further introduce yourself and get started. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori. And thank you so much, wonderful students, for participating in this webinar. I wanted to just start by saying, please, I wish you were all in my lab right now. I wish we were all sitting in my conference room and this could be more of like a roundtable discussion and interactive, but I really am hoping that this can be extremely practical for you. So I would love it if you interrupted me, if you had questions that deviated from my agenda, and if we truly made this kind of a working little talk that you felt comfortable asking questions. I want to introduce myself. I see a lot of names here that I know. Some of you I've had as students in my Dermpath rotation. One of you I have a student right now, Jody, taking a Dermpath rotation with me. So it's really nice to see familiar faces. I feel really comfortable teaching about Dermpath. And I love teaching medical students about Dermpath. I feel really qualified to teach about Dermpath. But when Lori first asked me if I would be interested in doing this webinar about finances, my initial reaction was, Lori, no, how could I do that? I don't have a finance degree. I'm not a financial planner. I am not a real estate agent. I'm not an accountant. I am not qualified to give this talk, but I kind of realized that when I was in your shoes, I think that I would have really benefited from someone who was not a vendor, who has nothing to sell me, who has nothing to gain, but had been in my shoes and gone through the journey that I was about to experience with medical school and residency and choosing jobs. Someone to kind of share a bit of personal information, a bit of transparent advice that they learned along the way. And so I hope that that is what you will get from this talk. And then also, I really hope that you realize that you always now have the opportunity to connect with me and ask me any questions later. So if we could go to the next slide. This is my email, and please connect with me on LinkedIn. And so if after this talk, you're mulling things over in your mind and you think, you know what, I was wondering about this, that, or the other, please feel comfortable contacting me. I absolutely love medical students. I was a medical student once, and so it's truly, it would be my honor to help you in any way I could. So don't hesitate to reach out. The medical society in general also has so much material and support for you that I would say Lori and other staff members may also be able to point you to the right direction for whatever questions or resources you might have. But I am also happy to be such a resource. So, you know, what I want to start with is what makes me qualified to give this talk. And I kind of already described to you that I'm not necessarily, but I do want to say that, you know, I was a medical student. I did my residency in anatomic and clinical pathology. I did a fellowship in dermatopathology. I moved around the country lots of times for my medical training. I sacrificed so much of my 30s. I took out so many loans. I was dirt poor and only hopes and dreams. And eventually I got my first job and I rolled into Iowa with absolutely nothing but some stuff in my car, and needed my mom to pay for the hotel room that I stayed in when I first arrived, and some work outfits. And that's how I started. And I was so anxious and so concerned about what kind of life is this going to be? I've made so many sacrifices. Did I take out too many loans? Am I ever going to be able to pay them back? And so I could have really benefited from someone to give me some reassurance of, it's okay. This is going to pay off. Your hard work will pay off. You're going to have a wonderful life. And with a little bit of guidance, with making some good decisions, you're going to have more than a wonderful life. You are one of the luckiest people in the world to have gotten into medical school, to be part of this amazing profession where you can give back, you can help people, you can have a fulfilling life. And you're also lucky enough to be really well compensated for that. How lucky you are. So we'll just start with that. Lots of reassurance. It's going to be okay. And now let's go over kind of my particular agenda for some of the ways that I was hoping to give you some advice. Thank you. So one of the first things that I would like for us to talk about is your particular feelings about money. We're going to be touchy-feely at first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about student loans and what your choices are. We're going to talk about personal financial choices and styles of decision-making. I do want to get into a little bit about choosing your specialty in your practice setting, because there's no way around it. That definitely will relate to your financial future. And then we'll just touch upon real estate and philanthropy. And I'm going to leave a little bit of time at the end for any sort of other money matters that you guys might want to discuss. But again, please interrupt. I would just love that if there were constant interruptions and sharing of personal questions and stories and experiences. And this is super interactive. I think it's a little bit harder in Zoom, but truly interrupt and jump in there, and we can make this as much of a discussion as we can. Next slide, please. Okay. So let's start with a little bit of self-reflection about what your feelings are about money, because I think that to guide this discussion in the best way possible, we really need to have each of you do some soul searching and decide, why is money important to you? How does money make you feel? A lot of people come with a lot of baggage about financial decision making. There's a lot of research around how financial decisions are such a big stressor in people's lives and people's marriages. A lot of people really avoid making them because it is so stressful to them. A lot of people tie up their self-worth in their financial reality. And so some of the decisions feel really high stakes because they relate their finances to, how good of a doctor they are, how good of a person they are. So I think that you'll really benefit by early on, while you're still a student, to kind of just come to terms and think through and be aware of your reality about how you feel about money, how it makes you feel, and what the purpose of money is. And so as an example of that, for me personally, I think that I am naturally a bit stressed about money. I especially was when I was in your position, when I had nothing, and the thought of having to pay back hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans and never having had like a real job, like it was very, very stressful for me. And so I kind of avoided really thinking about it too much. And then in addition, I think I also felt like not having any money would be so much fun. It would be so fun to be able to take any trip I wanted to take, be able to buy the house I wanted to buy, be able to buy the coolest clothes for my kids and the nicest car. And so it was also kind of a little bit of a source of excitement. And so, and invigorating. And so those were my sort of personal reflections about money. And I wanted that stability and security, which I didn't feel like I had when I was a medical student with lots of debt. So that has really guided some of my financial decisions. And I let myself think big picture like that sometimes when I'm thinking about making a decision. And I think it's helpful. So that is a self exercise that I would highly recommend. Next slide. And so the first kind of agenda topic that we're going to discuss is about student loans. And again, my qualifications for talking to you today are that I was a medical student. I took out an enormous number of loans. I felt really confused about how much I should take out and what I needed and how that payback would look like. But I'm not an accountant and I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not a loan officer. And what I tell you today isn't meant to replace any of that really important professional advice. And I'm not even going to go into much of like the technical component of all of that. And so please be informed and seek that kind of advice. But what I'm here to give you is kind of my personal information and story and big picture. And so when it comes to student loans, there are definitely people in your peer group, and maybe you're within this this circle of people who think, if I can get the loan, I should probably take it because I should get all the money I can. And, then I'll have everything I need. And I know people who actually did that. As much as they could get in loans, they would take it. And then even if they had the money like sitting in their bank account, they would just get the loans. And the interest rate drastically would change the more loans they got, like the higher amount, it became a higher interest rate. They obviously were unsubsidized after a certain amount. And they took out a lot of loans, and they justified that by saying, it really doesn't matter because I'm going into a high paying specialty. I'm sure I will. And it will be no trouble. I'll pay all these back in like the first few years. So who cares? And so I would caution against that. I think that the best thing you can do within your student loan journey, and I guess I should have asked how many of you are first years versus fourth years, because that kind of changes the discussion a little bit. But assuming there are some of you who are still in a place where you'll be taking out more loans, I think it's a really good exercise to go online and find some of those like amortized interest calculator tools where you can put in the details of, okay, here's the principal of the loans I'm taking out. Here's probably the time frame I'm going to pay them back. Here's the interest rate. It's really, I think, incredible to think about, for every dollar of loan money I get right now, how much does that actually cost me? And I definitely did not realize that at the time I was taking my loans out, but later I learned it. And I learned it by making kind of a big mistake. And this is not going to be a talk of me just oversharing personal information. But one thing I did want to share is that I fell into a trap that my the loan company that I used for my private loans was always trying to obviously make more money on me and get me into some traps. And one trap that I fell into was, oh, just put your loans in deferment. Like, you don't need to pay any loans during residency. In residency, you're a doctor and like you're not making that much. So just put your loans in deferment. So I did that. But later I realized, obviously, there's still accruing interest. And so for that 4 years of interest, that was kind of a lot of money. And I really regret that. And I could have paid on the loans and I didn't. And I was not financially strained at all while I was a resident because I was a busy resident and I was mostly just at the hospital. And when I wasn't at the hospital, I was mostly studying and just being a resident. And I didn't really go on trips and do a bunch of things. And I didn't have kids. And so my situation didn't really necessitate that I go into deferment. And I did anyways. And I regret that because it's powerful to think about what time does to the principal on loan and the interest. So in that amount of time, I lost a lot of money and I don't have a lot to show for it. And that was a regret. So I would highly recommend paying on your loans immediately as much as you can, living within your means or even below your means as a student, and finding healthy habits that fill your cup for free right now while you're a student. Instead of thinking, I really need the $120 massage today, and then I need to take myself out to lunch and treat myself, you can think, you know what, I'm going to go on a trail run with my friend, and then we're going to sit and have a meditation session. And then we're going to eat the apples that we packed, that we bought at the grocery store, and connect. And maybe that is a meaningful, wonderful afternoon that winds up giving you a bunch of endorphins and preparing you for the next big test you're about to take, rather um, you know, having to do expensive things. And the funny thing is, if you practice developing those kinds of habits now, it will still be wonderful and valuable. And even now, sitting here as someone who isn't attending and has, you know, a real job and doesn't necessarily worry about money anymore, I, in the same ways I worried about it as a student, I really am so grateful that I developed those healthy habits where I know that no matter what, I'm going to be okay. And I don't need money to be happy. It's wonderful and it's fun. And there are a lot of benefits to having money, and spending it can be fun. But I also know that I can fulfill myself without it. And so the secret to a happy life involves that. Do it now while you don't have money and develop those habits. That is my little soapbox commentary about loans and about your lifestyle. Let's go to the next slide, because I think it's a continuation a little bit of this. Yeah. So as a medical student, you're probably right now on the side of, I have very little / nothing / negative money right now. But someday I hope to be a doctor and make a high income salary. And maybe if I'm lucky, I'll even accumulate wealth. But that probably feels like a distant dream right now. And so the personal financial choices that you make now and some of the habits that you form now are going to be a big part of your ability to have a savings, have a retirement account, maybe even accumulate wealth and be blessed enough to do that. And so it's kind of a balance between two things, which is, sounds kind of obvious, minimizing your expenses and maximizing your income. So right now, as you're a medical student, there's only probably one of those two things that you can really do much about at the moment. And that is minimizing your expenses. And so that kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier about filling your cup in different ways and really keeping track of the money you're spending and what that does for you, and focusing on living like a student right now. And a wise medical student rotating with me once said, told me the phrase, live like a resident while you're a resident so that you don't have to while you're an attending. I think that's how it goes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And I love that because it's so true. Like, just practice living in the lifestyle that you have now and finding happiness with that. And then you don't have to worry about having issues and payback problems later. So next slide. So one of the things that I think is necessary to discuss in a talk related to medical students and your future financial journey is, there's no way around acknowledging that choosing your specialty and choosing your practice setting are going to have a big impact on your personal finances. And so I think when medical students, when I interact with medical students, it's usually that they're doing a rotation in pathology, but they mostly are not interested in going into pathology, but they kind of have questions about, like, how did you choose pathology? And I'm kind of in a position where I'm thinking about specialties and, you know, how might I choose a specialty and how will that impact my lifestyle? So I think that I'd like to kind of give you my personal advice about the matter. And that is, yes, there is a broad range of average incomes and salaries that you'll see in the reports about which specialty you choose. But the very most important thing about choosing your specialty is to follow your heart and to find your purpose, and do not choose a specialty based on income. You will regret it. And when it comes to your future career and your future life, if your goal is to have a happy, fulfilling life, please find the specialty that kind of speaks to you, and everything else will follow. And there is even a lot of evidence about that. And knowing that when you're doing something you love, success comes to you and financial success comes to you. And you really shouldn't go against your heart and your purpose and your passion just because you think that you'll make more money doing something different. So my first big piece of advice is not to just choose a specialty based on money, but within the specialty you choose. For example, let's say you are very passionate about kids, taking care of kids, and you really want to be a pediatrician, but you have concerns that, you know, the jokes are that, oh my gosh, pediatricians don't make anything. they can't even pay back their loans. They make so little, which is sad because they're taking care of our children. So you would think that that would be the highest paid specialty, but it is not. But choose pediatrics, but there are lots of ways that you can go into pediatrics and arrange your practice setting that might be able to maximize your earning potential, and if that is important to you. So how to choose a practice is a separate kind of piece of advice that that I have to discuss. And how to choose a practice is very much find your people. So I was kind of a medical nomad, and in medical school and in college, medical school, residency, fellowship, I changed states every single time. I just moved around over and over. I went for the best opportunity, the training that I wanted and needed. And at the end of all that, I kind of was like, wow, I'm a person without a home. Where do I go next? How do I, at this point, how am I going to start my life? And I realized that just because my training is officially over and I'm getting my first real job, you really still require so much mentorship and teaching and direction, especially as you begin your career. So find people that you really think would be the right people to do that. But in addition, when you're, interviewing for a position, and this is really applicable to your residency positions as well, look at the people and how they live and how they act. Those, you're probably going to be like those people if you choose to work in that setting. So find people that are living a life that you would like to live and have the balance that you would like to have in your work-life balance. And the other thing to consider is it's not 1950. So the first job that you take is probably not going to be your only job that you'll retire from and then later die, and that was your job. Lots of people change jobs. So maybe think of it as your 1 year, your 5 year, your 10 year, and your 30-year plan. And so the job that you take right out of residency or fellowship, and that can be part of your 1 year plan because you feel like there are reasons why that's the best option for you then, and you want to get certain experiences. But then it may not be part of your 10-year plan, and maybe ultimately you would like to start your own practice, own your own private practice, and really take full control over your financial decisions and your practice decisions, which is something that I did. But I would never have done that as part of my 1 year plan. That was in my maybe 10th year plan. But as a 1 year plan, sorry, I'm getting interrupted as a physician with something. Hold on one second. Okay. But that would not be in my 1 year plan. So remember that some of the choices that you're making about practice are in time, maybe appropriate, but not forever. And keep that big picture in mind. Next slide. So another thing that I think I participated in a panel discussion about finances, I think last fall. And one of the contributors in that panel discussion was a real estate agent, commercial real estate agent. But she had a lot to say about how real estate relates to physicians. And I am one of those physicians who has really kind of dabbled in real estate a decent amount. And so a lot of people kind of like ask me about that. And I think that if you go online, and if there are so many people that have very professional, very technical advice about how physicians should integrate real estate into their financial portfolios and the tax implications of that. And if you should have rental properties, and there's a lot of technical information, and many people think that that's a great idea. But the advice that I have for you is that I would like to give you as a medical student. And that is, are you a person who emotionally thinks that home ownership is important to you? Is that something that makes you happy, makes you feel stable, makes you feel secure, and is important? Because most of the data that you look at says that if you're going to just own the home for like 3 to 4 years, for example, the span of your medical school training, the span of your residency, that's usually almost a break even between all the fees and taxes and agent costs and closing costs. versus just renting. So most of the potential financial gain that you would get through ownership is negated through some of those short-term fees. So it's somewhat of a wash in that time frame, unless you make some really savvy decision and get super lucky. So it's probably neither here nor there. But if it emotionally feels good to you, then that's something that is important. And like kind of the broad topic that I want to keep coming back to in this whole talk is that money situations are emotional situations too, and don't pretend that they're not. I think it's important to kind of embrace that and integrate that into a lot of your financial decisions. So if ownership is important to you, then by all means, it's very attainable. And there are even special mortgages that they'll give to physicians, albeit often at higher rates, sometimes non-fixed. So with the caveat, just because someone will give it to you doesn't mean you should. It also applies with mortgages. And of course, the caveat of don't spend money you don't have is also something that applies with mortgages. But assuming that, you know, during your residency, you can be paying back on your loans and you can handle the monthly payment and it will really fill your cup and make you feel safe and secure and satisfied, it's very much a realistic possibility to own a home. And the other thing that you can do, and I know a lot of people who have done that, and I did this too, is you start with a tiny little house that you can afford in the place where you are resident. And then ultimately that can become a rental property for you. And it gives you passive income and it has tax benefits and you can kind of build your portfolio. And there are also ways that you can avoid capital gains taxes on real estate transactions when you add primary residence homes to your financial portfolio. So there's a lot of detail you can get into with real estate, but it again kind of comes down to your personal evaluation of yourself and how ownership makes you feel and whether you think you would be a good landlord. Are you handy? Because it also comes with work. It's not completely free money. And you have to also kind of enjoy that. You have to be the kind of person that is like, you know what? I kind of enjoy like doing this yard work and beautifying this rental property. And I know that I'm going to make money on the sale of it. And so for me, that's a little bit of like a fun hobby that me and my husband kind of like to do. And it's been beneficial to us. But for people that don't find that kind of a fun hobby, then I would say, be a physician. The best thing you can do is be a physician. You've spent all this money to become a doctor, and it's a high earning potential job. Do that. You're going to do that well. You'll make money, and other things can kind of be icing on the cake, but be a physician, do it well. You'll make a lot of money. Don't make yourself miserable over like all these side gigs and side hustles. But if you like real estate, there's a lot of like benefit to it if you like it. And maybe now was a good time. Nobody has taken me up on interrupting me, but if anyone kind of wants to jump in and like anything that we've just talked about or are going to talk about, I'd love if anyone wants to just share something or have a question or anything you want to talk a little more about before I go on. No? Okay. Then let's go to the next slide. And this slide is about philanthropy. And I think sitting in your shoes as a medical student, I really didn't think a lot about this topic because I had nothing and I had debt. So I really didn't feel like I had anything to give. But I think that, you know, the purpose of philanthropy is twofold. Obviously, it helps our community, it helps our world when we make sure that we are a part of it and giving back, and especially as the blessed 1% of people who are here in medical school, future doctors in the country that we have. We're not, most of us, dealing with a lot of the problems that most of the world are dealing with. I kind of consider it my personal goal and duty to give back. But maybe that's not financially for you right now because you probably don't have a lot of financial resources. But sometimes philanthropy can involve your time. Sometimes it can involve, you know, your intellectual abilities. There are plenty of ways to give back that aren't necessarily directly just money. that's something to consider, especially now that you're a student. But I think it's worthwhile to start thinking about, someday you will have resources. Someday, believe it or not, you're going to pay off those loans and you're going to have your attending job, and you're going to be so lucky that you will be in a position that you have more money than you actually need to live on. Today might not be that day, and you have different concerns and questions to face, but it is likely that that day will come for you, lucky one. And so for you, you should think about, when, how much, what kind of giving is appropriate for you. There are certain tax benefits to different types of accounts that you can open. And so I think that it's really advisable to consult a real financial planner, maybe toward the end of your residency, beginning of your attending career, and kind of talk with them about some of your goals about funding retirement and participating in philanthropic endeavors and real estate and all those things, because the tax implications can get especially complicated, and they can kind of be more helpful with the technical aspect of achieving your goals. But I think that it's something to think about now, which is maybe you give more of your time than your money in this stage of the game, but eventually you probably want to give more of your money than your time when you're busy attending. And working as an attending makes lots of money that can have such an impact on some of the causes that you care about. And so that's kind of the question that you need to ask yourself. And ultimately, if you're lucky enough to truly build wealth with this physician lifestyle that you are part of, then what is the purpose of that wealth building? And for a lot of people, it is to give back. And so I think these are all concepts that you really need to think about now and consider. And I see a question in the chat, and I'm going to read it aloud as I'm reading it. When you finished your training after fellowship and began applying to jobs, did you feel like you could or knew how to negotiate salaries, or were you just ready to take whatever? That is an amazing question, and I'm so glad you asked it, because it isn't part of my agenda here, but it's such a good question. So I did not feel like I was ready to negotiate salaries or negotiate anything. And so let's see, this is going to be my 11th year out of training. And so when I was I went to medical school in 2004 was when I started medical school, to age me for you guys. It was a different world back then. It's crazy I feel like I'm not old enough to tell you that things were so different back then, but they were. Like back then, we didn't actually walk around rounding with smartphones where we could Google details. We actually had pieces of paper and had to memorize things. And that feels so weird to tell you right now, but things were different. The other thing that was really different was the culture of medicine. And I talk about this with all the medical students that rotate with me. Back then, the culture was not what it is now. And especially for, I think, women in medicine, it was definitely not a culture of, you should feel comfortable asking questions. You should feel comfortable advocating for yourself. It was a culture of, be quiet, follow me around, listen to what I say, do what I say. It was extremely hierarchical. And the thought of negotiating with someone was, I don't even think I thought that was even allowed, to be perfectly honest. So any sort of negotiating abilities were kind of beat out of me throughout medical school and then residency training. And that was probably purposefully done. And so when I was looking into my first job opportunities, I definitely thought I better take what I get. And I'm sure that is pretty much what I deserve. And I'm still new and learning. And so of course they shouldn't have to pay me very much at first, because I haven't proven myself yet. And I don't think that I really recognized my worth. So one of the things I always tell the medical students on my rotation is, don't ever underestimate your worth, and always advocate for yourself and negotiate for yourself, especially if you're a female medical student, because I think there are so many studies that show that you're less likely to advocate, negotiate, ask for what you need. But just remember your worth, and there's no harm in it. I think I didn't realize at the time. I thought, but will I be considered difficult or high maintenance or like arrogant if I try to negotiate a better salary than what they're offering me? But the truth is, no, you should. And maybe what you really need once you do a true evaluation of the position and the offer isn't more money, it's more time. And so if I just gave you some like really, really basic negotiating 101 advice, and that is now from the perspective of someone who has hired a lot of people, because I did start my own practice and I have hired other physicians. I have hired people of all levels to work in my company. I think that the best advice I can give you is always come back and try to negotiate a higher salary, because it is, chances are you're their top candidate and they have a range of what they would offer you. And as long as if you just come back with a little bit higher of an amount, you'll probably just get it because you're the top candidate and they offered you the job and they want you. And it takes a lot of money to onboard a new employee, and they're hoping that it'll be for a long time and that you'll be happy. So always ask for more money. And if they say no, then come back and ask for more vacation time, and always do that. There's nothing to lose. Do it in a respectful way, do it in a positive way. And if they find that to be a negative quality about you, and if you feel like that somehow has soured a relationship, then it's probably not a great opportunity for you. Honestly, if that is something that is going to set the stage for conflict, then it was probably going to be kind of a one-sided hierarchical taking advantage of relationship in the first place. If that career opportunity actually thinks that it makes a negative impact on you for trying to negotiate a higher salary or vacation, I would say like run away from that. So in my opinion, now that I'm 42 and not a medical student in your position who didn't try to negotiate at all, believe it or not, when I was offered my first job, the job that I really wanted, they called me on a Friday, like at sort of end of day, and they're like, we met, we've decided that you're the candidate we want. And I said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Yes, I accept. And I literally just accepted on the spot without even like really seeing the details of the contract. And that is so ill-advised. And like, I think that is a reflection of like all of my years of training. I was kind of like overly, I was kind of naive and overly trusting and so excited to like be finally like a doctor with a real job. And so in a lot of ways, I kind of think like, oh, what a cute Tiffani that did that, but ill-advised. And this Tiffani who isn't attending is telling you, always negotiate, always say, thank you so much. I will think about it. I need a little time. I will have my lawyer review it. Always have a lawyer review a contract. Be that savvy person, because nobody will advocate for you except for you. And so many details that are in your employment contract will be so relevant to you and your lifestyle. So read it closely, understand it, have somebody that does physician contracts review it, because they'll have a better idea of kind of like what's standard and if anything is like out of the ordinary, because you probably will not have reviewed a lot of physician contracts. So it's always good for someone who looks at a lot of them to say, this is out of the ordinary. They want you to give 180 days notice. No, we're going to negotiate that down. There are a lot of like other things that are available for negotiating besides just the salary and the vacation. But for me, salary and vacation were kind of like, those are really important to your lifestyle. So I would say always negotiate those. Does that answer your question, or do you have, or are there more questions about that? Great. Oh, awesome. Yeah. And I feel honestly like I've trained a lot of residents and medical students, and probably some of the most common questions that people come back to me later and ask for my advice actually involves, now that you bring that up, like I have a job offer for my first job, what should I do, kind of a thing. And I do think that we're just very not well prepared for handling that. In medical school, you learn the Krebs cycle, but you don't learn the basics of just like getting your first job and like doing it. It's kind of sad, but I learned from the school of life, and I am happy to give you all my advice. So yeah, let's go to our next slide now. And some of like the final things that I just really wanted to emphasize in this talk include, coming to terms with your own financial feelings. And if those are stressful feelings, don't think that just putting your head in the sand and not making decisions makes the decisions. I think I was a little bit of that category where I thought financial things are stressful. I'm just going to focus on the fact that I'm going to be a high income earner and I have a lot going on in medical school. I'm going to like study for my tests and not really think about it. And that position that I took did make a lot of decisions for me, because I think I probably borrowed more than I really needed in retrospect. And I didn't start paying back as soon as I needed to. And I paid a lot more money in the long run because of it. But also I feel like if I had really come to terms with my feelings and accepted them and like looked closely at my finances, I actually probably would have been able to alleviate some of the stress that I was feeling, because so much of it I think was just based on like personal history and like things that you're taught growing up culturally, things like that. And I think that if I were able to like evaluate things more objectively, I would have been able to, if I had gone to a webinar like this one, I would have been able to say, you know what, things are going to be fine. I'm very lucky and I have a lot to be excited about. And all I need to do are some really minor basic things that are going to kind of get me in control of my financial future. And I can actually turn this stressful feeling into a really good feeling. And so for me, that is why you do that exercise. There's so much to be gained for it. And what's the purpose of, making money, but to have it make you happy, to have it make a difference in the world, to be able to take good care of your kids. Those are things for me that are so important and I feel lucky about. And I feel like I constantly am kind of doing this exercise of like, what are my feelings right now? Because a lot of times I recognize that like these feelings aren't really based on any sort of reality of what's going on right now and the decision at hand. A lot of them are based on like kind of historic, cultural, personal baggage. And I don't need to let that be. Let's just like work through that. And then the decision at hand, let's be more objective. And it really helps me sometimes. And so really do your homework from this webinar, which is to go and play with an online interest calculator. No matter whether you're a first year or a fourth year, it will always be a powerful tool, and paying more rapidly on your loans is always the answer. Don't forget that point. And one of the things that had come up in our panel discussion about finances during the Women in Medicine conference was somebody brought up, well, what if you plan to participate in one of the like rural health loan repayment programs or some other like federally qualifying program where your loans will be forgiven? If that's the case, shouldn't I just get as many as I can get because it's like free money? And when I heard the person ask that question, I was like, oh no, honey, don't say that. You will regret that, because most of these repayment programs, they're capped out at fairly low amounts. And it's so easy to take out way more loans than you could possibly get forgiven in those programs. And when you're deciding whether to participate in one of those programs or not, I think it really goes back to what I mentioned about choosing a specialty and choosing a practice setting. Please, please, please follow your heart and follow your sense of purpose and your passion in life. It really should never be a financial decision. Once you have decided, after following your heart and following your purpose, finding your purpose, that you want to be in a rural area or serving an underserved population, and then you qualify for these kinds of programs, of course, by all means, take advantage. But I don't think it should ever be like trying to participate in the program that guides you into any of those specialty or practice setting decisions, because the truth of the matter is, if making money and accumulating wealth is your goal, it's probable that that wouldn't be the best route anyways. So don't make that be what guides you, and you're going to get capped on your repayment amounts. And you're probably going to be on the hook for the money. So never think, I'm just taking out this money, it's free, I won't have to pay it back. That is a recipe for disaster. And that goes into to defer, not to defer. Don't defer. Don't be like me. I ended up paying way more for the dollars that I that I took out than I really needed to. And I have very little to show for it. I was a resident. I was mostly just like working. I don't have like these amazing magical memories of anything I did with the money that I didn't pay back on my loans. It really probably didn't even make that big of a difference. And I should have just been paying back on my loans, but I let them talk me into it because that's what the loan companies are there to do, make money off of you and make money off of the loans. So of course they want you to take as much money and pay it back in as long as possible. And that's how they make money. So they are not an unbiased opinion on what you should do there. Keep that one in mind. Also, just remember that you're a medical student, live like it. You're a resident, live like it. Those are your times to not live beyond your means, and just really check yourself with budget and lifestyle and focus on being a trainee. And it's a time of personal growth where you're building your knowledge and your skills, and you really don't want to be spending a lot of money, and it's not really probably the time to get that fancy car and do all those things if you have loans. If you have a super rich family and they're buying you all this stuff and taking great care of you, congratulations. That was not me. And hopefully I wouldn't guess that that's a lot of the people. If you're on this webinar, you're probably not like that person. But so if you've borrowed money, just remember your net worth is negative. So every dollar you spend is spending a lot more. And I think we have a question. People always talk about investing and starting early, but is there a way to do it, or is it even worth it when you have a loan? You guys are asking the very best questions. That also is a fantastic question that I really struggled with during really residency, because residency is the first time that I even had an income. During medical school, my income was zero and I had loans. So that's that. But during residency, a couple of questions came up, and I'll go into specifics. One is that when you first arrive, you're going to have to sign up for, getting your payroll and having your check deposited, and they're going to ask you whether you want to participate in the 401k program. And so my first piece of advice, aside from, yes, start paying back on your loans right away, is to go ahead and start putting money into the employer sponsored 401k program. All of the programs that you guys are going to be in are like super legit, like quality places, and they are definitely going to have employer contributions that they will put in along with the money that you are going. So either it'll be a matching situation or a profit sharing situation. Doesn't matter the details, but basically for money that you put in toward your retirement 401k, there will be a contribution from the employer probably. And so that is free money that you can get, and you should definitely participate in it to the maximum if it were me, if you can. Even if you didn't have that, it's still a wonderful chance at forming a really important life habit, which is a proportion of the salary that you earn goes toward retirement and planning for that. Again, there are a lot of tax reasons why you would want to do that, but the thought experiment of seeing what time does to interest over the course of loan amounts, that applies to interest that you accrue on money in your 401k. And so I did participate I maxed out my 401k during my residency, and I kept that in a separate portfolio than like anything from any of my jobs, and I had a separate one for fellowship. So I actually still keep it separate, and I love looking at that account because it is such a good reminder for me of, I made a really good decision, and now this is real money. Like, even though like people try to tell themselves like, oh, you're in training, it's not your real job, like the amount you're making isn't very much, like blah, blah, blah. But now I can look at that account and I can see and be proud of, I saved this and put this while I was a residency, put this into this account, and it has grown and grown and grown in all these years. And look at this exact amount of money thanks to that. So for me, that's like a really affirming thing to do. And I really advise that. Beyond the 401k, there are a couple other investment strategies that I would probably advise during residency if you're able. And so, of course, if you're that person who actually has chosen to like have a family and you have 4 kids and a stay-at-home spouse, and you can hardly make ends meet, like, of course, that's a different situation. But for me, I was single. I was mostly at the hospital working. I didn't have a lot of bills. And so I was able, but there are also Roth IRA options that you can do, that there's a lot of like tax benefit to participating in that early on when your salary is relatively low and you're young. And so I would recommend that as well. But beyond that, it's probably best to just pay off your loans. And like, that's a very general comment to make. And it depends on the rate that like one thing you have to balance is, what interest rate did you take your loans out versus what is sort of the average interest that people are getting in like money market accounts right now. And so that's probably a question for a professional financial advisor. Although I will say, I used to ask that question, and I've asked it to multiple financial advisors, like while I was a resident and student, and I didn't always feel like I got a very definitive answer. And nobody was like, oh, I have a calculator to calculate that. Let me put these numbers in. Here's your answer. Nobody was ever very definitive with me with that very question. And so I decided to do the emotional. I'm kind of like an emotional decision maker by nature. And so I just decided, you know what? These loans have a really negative impact on my like emotional state. I would rather have them go away than I would have like this account where I'm looking at like the balance of my loan versus another account where I'm looking at like, oh, I have this like brokerage account and I'm making interest on it. And for me, that became like a complicated reality. Whereas to be able to celebrate that milestone of, I just paid off my last student loan. I am loan free and I'm out of debt. And like that, like carrot of like, I can't wait to reach that day, caused me to just, when I started my real job, aggressively pay off my student loans and not really put anything in like an investment account at that time, aside from my 401k and the Roth IRA thing that I just mentioned. That was my personal choice. But again, I'm not a professional. These are some complex questions. I'm just giving you sort of like transparent advice from like a normal real world physician with that question. But it's such a great one. I had that question a lot. So yeah, we have 4 more minutes. Let's finish my takeaway. Yeah, follow your heart to the specialty that brings you purpose. That is the pathway to a life well lived. Accumulating wealth in itself is absolutely not going to make you happy. It's not going to give you a good life. And if right now you're starting to feel like that is what you should do, then I would go back to number 1, which is start examining your feelings about money and find out why you're thinking that, because it could be some like deep-seated issues that you have about the absence of money or some stressors. But I think that like if you go into any research or study, money will not make you happy. You can do a lot of happy things, but you have to evaluate yourself and find your purpose in life and your calling. And that is what's going to make you happy. So don't decide a specialty based on money. Find a practice by finding your people, and find ways to give back in the world, in your community, be it money, be it your time, be it who you are. But find a way to integrate that into your life, because that is also really part of a life well lived as a physician. And then I think next slide is another, just please, I would love, you might have questions that have developed throughout the course of this or as you're thinking through things. I would love to hear from you. You are so welcome to send me an email, and I'm happy to just give you advice about my missteps, my failures, my successes. And if you can learn from anything that I've experienced, I think that is how the medical community takes care of each other. So thank you guys so much. I'm honored to be able to give you my life advice. And if you ever want to do a Dermpath rotation, reach out. I would love to host you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Milless, so much. That was a really good talk. I love your transparency. There is one more question. Michaela asked about, is there any drawback to a high earning savings account, or should I move all my savings, not much, to this type of account?
Oh, awesome. Sorry, Michaela, I missed your question. That is a great question. I never really had any, to be honest, like I didn't have much savings, and because I always had so many student loans at decently high interest rates at the time that I was going through school, interest rates got kind of high. So I basically tried to like clear out my account as much as possible every single month to try to like pay down on my loans once I had any money as a resident. Because for me, even those high interest savings accounts didn't compare to the interest rates my loans were at. But if that's different for you guys, I don't really know what like loan rates are right now, then yeah, if you can compare the rates and decide. But again, for me, like just paying off the loans was so important for my like mental health that I was aggressively trying to do so once I could. But yeah, if you do have a little bit in savings, you might as well get a higher interest account versus not. But once I really started having money, I think you consider like using like other vehicles, like brokerage accounts where there's like it goes beyond like a savings account. And so that's like sort of a different phase of life. But at the time I was just paying off loans. Well, thank you guys so much. And I hope to hear from a lot of you. And I hope that one of the biggest takeaways you get is that you are a super lucky person in this universe to be where you're at. You have no reason to stress. I have every reason to think that you are going to make great choices and have a happy financial life and be able to give back and live well. And so just give yourself that reassurance and try to enjoy these moments because there's no reason to live in stress. Be happy and excited for the opportunities that you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Milless, and thank you to all of you that have joined us today. Hope you have a
Thanks.
good- Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.